A bucket of pulled weeds, a handful of fireplace ash, a jar of cracked eggshells, and a bag of orange peels headed for the trash. 4 things most gardeners throw away every single week. But here is something the fertilizer industry would rather nobody figured out. These 4 scraps contain every major nutrient a garden needs: nitrogen, potassium, calcium, and a living enzyme so powerful it can replace an entire shelf of store-bought products. No chemicals, no cost, no kidding. What follows are 4 liquid fertilizer recipes passed down through generations of backyard growers. Methods so effective, some gardeners who tried them never purchased a single bottle of fertilizer again. And the 4th one? It might be the most remarkable homemade solution most people have never heard of. Time to find out why. Trick number 1. The weed and grass elixir. Unlocking free nitrogen. Here is a question worth thinking about. Why do weeds grow so aggressively, without anyone feeding them, watering them, or giving them a single drop of fertilizer? The answer is hiding underground. Pull a common garden weed out of the soil, something like burr medic, a small clover-like plant with soft green leaves. Flip it over. Look at the roots. Attached along the root system there are tiny, round nodules, almost like little beads. Those nodules are the clue. Burr medic belongs to the legume family, and those small bumps contain colonies of nitrogen-fixing bacteria, microscopic organisms that pull nitrogen straight out of the air and lock it into the plant's tissue. That means every time a gardener rips out a weed and tosses it in the bin, free nitrogen goes with it. Pounds of it, over a season. But the value runs even deeper than that. Weeds like dandelions, thistles, and dock send roots far below the topsoil, sometimes 2-3 feet down. They mine minerals from layers that vegetable roots will never reach, pulling calcium, magnesium, and potassium up into their leaves and stems. So the real question is not how to get rid of weeds. The real question is how to capture what they have already collected. Here is the method. Take a clean 5-gallon plastic bucket. Gather a generous armful of freshly pulled green weeds, chickweed, clover, nettles, dandelion greens, or even just fresh grass clippings. The more material, the richer the brew. Pack the greens loosely into the bucket, filling it roughly halfway. No need to chop anything fine, just tear the bigger pieces apart by hand. Next, add a small handful of dark, finished compost right on top. This step matters. The compost introduces billions of active microorganisms, the living workforce that will break down the plant material and release its nutrients into the water. Now fill the bucket to the top with clean water. Rainwater is ideal. Chlorinated tap water can slow the microbial activity, so if tap water is the only option, let it sit in an open container for 24 hours first to off-gas the chlorine. Place a loose-fitting lid or a piece of cloth over the bucket. Set it in a warm, sheltered spot. A sunny corner of the patio works perfectly. And then walk away for 2 to 3 weeks. Yes, patience is part of the recipe. Over those weeks, the mixture will darken, it will bubble slightly, and it will develop a smell, an honest, earthy, unmistakable smell. That odor is organic matter breaking down and releasing nitrogen, phosphorus, and trace minerals directly into the water. After 2 to 3 weeks, strain the dark liquid into a clean container. What remains is a concentrated nitrogen extract, and it is potent. Here is the part most people get wrong. This concentrate should never be poured directly onto plants. Undiluted, it can burn roots and shock tender growth. The correct ratio: 1 cup of weed tea to 10 cups of water. Water the base of vegetables, herbs, and flowers with this diluted solution. Within days, the difference is visible. Greener leaves, stronger stems, faster growth, all from weeds that were headed for the trash. And that is the first trick. Free nitrogen, pulled from the air by plants that most gardeners consider the enemy. But nitrogen is only one piece of the puzzle. The next trick unlocks 2 minerals that are even harder to come by, and the source is sitting in every fireplace. Trick number 2. Fireplace alchemy. Potassium and calcium from wood ash. What happens to a log after it burns? It crumbles into gray powder, lifeless, silent, finished. Or is it? That ash, the kind swept out of fireplaces and wood stoves every winter, is hiding a concentrated payload of essential plant minerals. Depending on the type of wood burned, a single cup of ash can contain between 5 and 15% potassium, along with meaningful amounts of calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and a cocktail of trace elements. The potassium alone makes it worth saving. Potassium drives flower formation, triggers fruit set, and strengthens the entire plant against drought and disease. Commercial potassium fertilizers cost real money. This one costs nothing. But, and this is the mistake that catches well-meaning gardeners every season, raw wood ash should never be scattered directly onto garden beds in large amounts. Here is why. Ash is highly alkaline. Dumping it straight onto the soil can spike the pH dramatically, disrupt the microbial communities that keep soil alive, and chemically burn the fine root hairs that plants depend on for nutrient uptake. So the ash holds treasure, but accessing that treasure without causing damage requires one extra step, a step that old-world farmers knew centuries ago: fermentation. Start with about 10 to 12 liters of rainwater or chlorine-free water. Rainwater is ideal. It is naturally soft, free of chemical additives, and slightly acidic, which helps dissolve the alkaline minerals locked inside the ash. Measure out roughly 500 grams of fine, completely cooled wood ash, that is about 2 heaping cups. One critical rule: only use ash from clean, untreated natural wood. Never ash from painted furniture, pressure-treated lumber, or charcoal briquettes soaked in lighter fluid. Those contain heavy metals and chemical residues that have no place in a garden. Slowly stir the ash into the water. Do not dump it in all at once. Sprinkle it gradually while stirring, so the minerals disperse evenly without clumping at the bottom. Now comes the ingredient that transforms this from a simple ash water rinse into a living fertilizer. Add 1 to 2 tablespoons of unsulfured blackstrap molasses. Why molasses? Because it is rocket fuel for beneficial microbes. The simple sugars in molasses feed bacteria and fungi, causing them to multiply rapidly. As those microorganisms go to work on the raw ash minerals, they break them down into bioavailable forms, nutrients that plant roots can actually absorb. Without this step, much of the mineral content passes through the soil unused. With it, the ash becomes a complete, living feed. Cover the container loosely and let it rest. At minimum, 24 hours. But for maximum potency, some experienced growers let this mixture ferment quietly for 2 to 4 weeks, stirring it once every few days. When it is ready, the liquid will be dark and rich. Dilute it at a ratio of 1 part ash liquid to 10 or 20 parts water, never stronger. Pour it around the base of heavy feeding plants like tomatoes, peppers, squash, and roses. The potassium pushes robust flower development and heavier fruit set. The calcium protects against blossom end rot, that heartbreaking dark patch that ruins tomatoes just as they are about to ripen. Cold, dead winter ash, turned into summer abundance. That is the kind of trick that does not show up on the label of any store-bought bottle. Now, what if the missing mineral is not potassium, but calcium? And what if the answer is sitting in the kitchen, cracked open every morning at breakfast? Trick number 3. The eggshell elixir, crafting water-soluble calcium. Think about how many eggs get cracked in a single household over the course of a year. Scrambled eggs on weekday mornings, cakes for birthdays, quiche on Sunday, hundreds of shells, maybe thousands, all tossed straight into the trash without a second thought. But eggshells are roughly 95% calcium carbonate. And calcium is one of the most important minerals in any garden, the structural backbone of plant cells. Without enough calcium, fruit skins crack, root vegetables grow hollow, and tomatoes develop blossom end rot from the inside out. So why not just crush the shells and mix them into the soil? Here is what almost nobody mentions, and it is the reason so many gardeners try eggshells and see zero results. Calcium carbonate is virtually insoluble in water. Crushed eggshells tossed into a garden bed will sit there unchanged for years, possibly decades. The calcium is locked inside a mineral matrix that plant roots simply cannot access. A tomato plant could be starving for calcium while sitting in soil surrounded by eggshell fragments. The nutrient is right there, and completely unreachable. That is the problem. The solution comes from a technique rooted in Korean natural farming, a method called water-soluble calcium, or WCA. It begins with heat. Collect eggshells, rinse them clean, and let them dry. Then spread the crushed shells on a baking tray and roast them, either in a frying pan over medium heat or in an oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. 30 to 45 minutes until the shells turn a light golden brown. The roasting does something essential. It burns away the thin organic membrane that lines the inside of every eggshell. Left intact, that membrane would rot inside the solution and ruin the entire batch. Removing it through heat leaves behind pure, clean calcium carbonate, ready for the next step. Place the roasted, cooled shells into a large glass jar. Pour in white vinegar or brown rice vinegar at a ratio of 1 part eggshells to 10 parts vinegar by weight. What happens next is immediate and dramatic. The acidic vinegar hits the alkaline calcium carbonate, and a vigorous chemical reaction begins. The mixture bubbles and fizzes as carbon dioxide gas escapes, and the calcium dissolves out of the solid shell into the liquid. Leave the jar loosely covered at room temperature in a shaded spot. Over the next 7 to 10 days, the reaction will slow and eventually stop completely. When no more bubbles appear, the transformation is finished. Strain the liquid into a clean bottle. This is concentrated water-soluble calcium, and a very small amount goes a long way. The dilution ratio: 1 part calcium liquid to 1,000 parts water. Spray this fine mist directly onto the leaves and flowers of plants during the cool evening hours when the leaf pores are open and absorption is highest. The calcium enters immediately, strengthening cell walls from the inside out. The result? Firmer, plumper, sweeter fruit. Fewer cracks, less rot, better resistance to pests and fungal disease, all from eggshells that were about to become landfill. 3 tricks down, each one made from something most people discard. But the fourth, the one that was promised at the beginning of this video, takes the concept further than most gardeners have ever imagined. Trick number 4, the citrus eco-enzyme, turning garbage into garden gold. Every kitchen produces fruit scraps, orange rinds, lemon peels, grapefruit skins. They get tossed into the garbage without a thought, just waste headed for decomposition in a landfill somewhere. But citrus peels are anything but waste. They are loaded with citric acid, vitamin C, flavonoids, and concentrated essential oils. When fermented the right way, those peels become something extraordinary, a complex biochemical solution packed with natural enzymes, beneficial organic acids, and antimicrobial compounds. It is called an eco-enzyme, sometimes known as garbage enzyme, and the process of making it is disarmingly simple. The formula: 1 part brown sugar or molasses, 3 parts citrus fruit peels, and 10 parts clean water. One important detail: use a sturdy plastic container with an airtight lid, never glass. The fermentation produces intense gas pressure, and glass can shatter. Add the water first. Stir in the brown sugar until it dissolves completely. Then pack in the citrus peels. A helpful, optional step: dry the peels in the sun for a day or 2 before adding them. Sun drying concentrates the natural sugars in the rind, which accelerates the fermentation. Seal the lid, and begin waiting, because this recipe requires the one ingredient that no store can sell: time. The full fermentation cycle takes 3 months, not 3 days, not 3 weeks, 3 full months. Here is what happens inside that container stage by stage. During the first month, wild yeasts and bacteria wake up. They begin consuming the sugars, producing alcohol and a tremendous volume of carbon dioxide gas. The container will swell. It must be burped, the lid cracked open briefly every day or two to release pressure. Skip this step, and the container may burst. In the second month, a shift occurs. Acetic acid bacteria take over, converting the alcohol into vinegar. The scent changes from sweet to sharp and tangy. By the third month, the enzymatic activity peaks. Proteases, amylases, and lipases, natural enzymes produced by the microbial community, reach their highest concentration. The liquid stabilizes into a dark brown solution with a clean, citrusy, sour aroma. This is the finished Eco-Enzyme, and its applications are remarkable. Diluted at 1 part enzyme to 1,000 parts water. Use it to drench vegetable beds. It stimulates aggressive root development, unlocks nutrients trapped in the soil, and measurably increases crop yields. But it does not stop there. The natural antibacterial and mild insecticidal properties of the enzyme solution make it an effective foliar spray, one that helps repel common garden pests and suppress fungal infections. No synthetic chemicals involved. And here is the bonus that surprises most people. Eco-Enzyme is not limited to the garden. Diluted with water, it becomes an effective non-toxic household cleaner. It cuts grease, freshens air, and cleans floors. Entirely biodegradable, completely safe around children and pets. 3 months of patience, a handful of fruit scraps, and the result is a multi-purpose solution that replaces both garden fertilizer and household chemicals. That is the fourth trick, and the reason so many gardeners who discover it never go back. Four tricks: weeds, ash, eggshells, and fruit peels. Every one of them free, every one of them effective, and not a single bottle of synthetic fertilizer required. But there is something larger happening here than just saving money on plant food. Every time a gardener brews weed tea instead of buying nitrogen in a plastic jug, every time fireplace ash gets fermented instead of thrown out, every time eggshells are roasted and dissolved instead of dumped in a landfill, a small, quiet rebellion takes place against the idea that growing food requires a factory. It does not. Nature already built the system. These 4 methods simply work with it. Try even one of them. See what happens. And if the results surprise you, leave a comment and share which trick made the biggest difference. Until next time, keep your hands in the dirt, keep your face toward the sun, and always remain beautifully and deeply rooted in grace.